A cordial greeting. Today is May 1, 2023. This is meteorologist Ruben Garcia speaking. Today's video will be very interesting because we will be discussing the changes we have observed during the last few weeks in the Pacific and Atlantic regions and how these changes in ocean surface temperature can have a significant effect on the hurricane season, both in the West Pacific and the Atlantic region. As you may know, the hurricane season officially begins on May 15th in the East Pacific region and on June 1st in the Atlantic region. So we are 2 weeks away from the start of the East Pacific season and 1 month away from the start of the Atlantic season. I wanted to start this video by showing the following animation, which shows us the ocean surface temperature anomalies. In red and yellow, we have temperatures that are warmer than normal, while in blue, we have ocean surface temperatures that are cooler than normal. There are 3 areas that capture our attention. First, we can see that the ocean surface temperatures in the Niño 3.4 region continue to warm since February, and this coincides very well with the forecast that there is a high probability that the El Niño phenomenon will develop during the hurricane season. Remember that the El Niño phenomenon usually reduces cyclonic activity in the Caribbean and the Atlantic region, as it causes stronger than usual shear winds in this region. On the other hand, we also have the region southwest of the United States, where we see ocean surface temperatures that are cooler than usual, and when we see these cooler than usual temperatures in this region, it usually helps cyclones to form in the West Pacific region. However, something very interesting that we have seen during the last few weeks is that the tropical Atlantic region's temperatures have risen sharply, to values not seen in decades. So we are talking about this region in the Atlantic having very warm ocean surface temperatures for this time of year, and this could be helping to form some cyclones. So as you can see, we have 2 conflicting factors. First, the development of the El Niño in the Pacific should suppress cyclonic activity in the Atlantic. However, these warm ocean surface temperatures could help counteract the effects of El Niño. So in this video, we will be trying to analyze how hurricane seasons that have had this configuration of temperature anomalies behave. It is essential to remember that if El Niño develops, the chances of seeing less cyclonic activity in the Atlantic increase considerably. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is because the shear wind increases in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean region. However, something very interesting is that the El Niño phenomenon has little effect in the subtropical Atlantic region and the area between the Caribbean and Africa. So the big question is whether it is possible that we will have more cyclonic activity than we are anticipating. Let's move on to the next image, where we can see a comparison of the ocean surface temperature anomalies we currently have in May 2023 with hurricane seasons that have been more active than normal. You can see that we have an almost perfect configuration for this hurricane season to be favored by the warm temperature anomalies in the Atlantic. So when we compare these 2 images, we can think that the situation in the Atlantic is perfect for seeing an active hurricane season. However, again, remember that El Niño has a significant effect on increasing shear winds. It is very important to look at the history or climatology to be able to analyze what effects this pattern could have in the hurricane season. When we compare with similar hurricane seasons, we can see that some similar years are 1877, 1896, 1899, 1965, and 1969, where on average we had El Niño in the Pacific, colder temperatures towards the southwest of the United States, and a warmer than normal tropical Atlantic. When we look at the history of these hurricane seasons, they were seasons of hurricanes close to normal or slightly more active than normal. So, this is the first clear example. Of course, we should note that although the Atlantic is very warm, the fact that El Niño will probably develop should help suppress cyclonic activity, and we may see a season close to normal or slightly more active than normal. When we look at the history, we can also see this in the following image, where we can see how cyclonic activity varies depending on whether we are in the La Niña or El Niño phenomenon and when surface temperatures in the Atlantic are warmer than normal. So when we see this graph, we can first see that there is a clear direct relationship where when we are in the La Niña phenomenon, cyclonic activity in the Atlantic usually increases considerably, as we can see in this graph. Also, when surface temperatures in the Atlantic are warmer than normal, we also see more cyclonic activity than normal. So the most active years are those in which we have the La Niña phenomenon and warmer than usual temperatures in the Atlantic. However, what happens when we have the El Niño phenomenon as it is currently being forecast, and when temperatures are quite warm, as we have them at the moment in the Atlantic? When we look at this graph, we can see that the years that have had these conditions behave like years with cyclonic activity close to or slightly more active than normal. So here we have another clear piece of evidence that historically, when we have had this pattern in the Atlantic and Pacific, it tends to be a hurricane season close to normal or simply slightly more active. So it is clear evidence that it is very difficult for us to see a season more active than normal if the strong El Niño phenomenon that is anticipated finally develops. Another factor that I wanted to mention is that these ocean surface temperatures may favor a fairly active African monsoon trough season, and historically, we have seen that strong monsoon trough seasons tend to result in more cyclones in the southwestern region of the Atlantic. So this suggests that we may see the development of some systems with a trajectory similar to what I am drawing at the moment. However, note that this has little effect on the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean region. This goes hand in hand with the forecast that the El Niño phenomenon should be reducing cyclonic activity at least in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico region. However, it may be that the pattern of warmer than usual temperatures in the Atlantic favors a more active season in the subtropical Atlantic region. In fact, we can see this clearly in the latest forecasts for the months of August, September, and October for the peak of the season, where precisely the ConCIPS model shows higher than normal precipitation anomalies precisely in the tropical Atlantic region and the southwestern subtropical Atlantic region. Also, note that for the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico region, they show less precipitation than normal, possibly being influenced by the El Niño phenomenon. So this model suggests more cyclonic activity in this region. Similarly, we have the CFS climate model that shows us the same panorama, with a less active Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico than usual, but that suggests that cyclonic activity could be focusing on the subtropical Atlantic region and the southwestern Atlantic region. We also have the model ensemble, which shows us this panorama. So, very likely if the pattern we are currently seeing continues, this is the area where we will see the greatest number of cyclones during this year, and the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico will probably have less activity than usual. However, remember that it is important to prepare for hurricane season because just one cyclone can cause a disaster in the region where you live. So please prepare for this hurricane season and do not let your guard down. We will also be attentive to the next updates on the forecasts. For example, the University of Arizona predicted a more active hurricane season than usual, which is very interesting, and we will be watching to see if other groups agree with this idea. Although remember that the vast majority is forecasting a hurricane season close to normal. Finally, I wanted to talk about what we can expect during the next few weeks. Know that for the middle and end of May, a phase of the Madden-Julian oscillation is moving, which could help with the formation of some system in the southwest region of the Atlantic. So we will be watching to see if any cyclone develops in the region near the Bahamas or near the state of Florida. If so, what the CFS shows is that we may see more precipitation than usual in this region. So this area will be the first one we will be watching as we approach the start of the season. Also, the ConCIPS model shows us greater precipitation than usual in this region of the Atlantic, and with the arrival of this phase of the Madden-Julian oscillation, it may be that we see the formation of the first cyclone of the hurricane season in the Atlantic. Well, that's all for today's video. Remember to join Hurricane Info on YouTube by simply clicking on the red button at the bottom of the video that says subscribe. Click on it and then click on the bell to receive notifications when I upload new videos. Here at Hurricane Info, we are preparing for this hurricane season. So the question is, are you ready for this season? Write your opinion about the forecast for this season in the comments. So, see you later.